While in real life, anxiety and anxiety disorders are certainly no laughing matter, they've been fodder for films almost since the dawn of the movie industry. From comedies like High Anxiety, What About Bob, and Airplane, to spine-tingling thrillers by Alfred Hitchcock including Vertigo and Marnie, mental illness is often mined in Hollywood for laughs, drama, and even frights. Anyone who struggles with anxiety or anxiety disorders knows they're serious business, but that didn't stop Mel Brooks from creating High Anxiety, a classic parody of suspense films about mental illness. In this movie, the main character discovers strange doings when he arrives at his administrator job at the Psychoneurotic Institute for the very nervous. Ultimately, he must confront his own high anxiety to prove himself innocent of murder. Filmed in 1942 and starring Bette Davis, Now, Voyager is one of a number of movies with a soap opera theme. After a life of being dominated by her mother, the main character suffers anxiety and depression. She is overweight and feels worthless until a psychiatrist helps her recover her sense of self and she reconnects with life and romance on a sea journey. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, is a theme in As Good as It Gets, the romantic comedy drama that garnered Academy Awards for stars Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt. Nicholson's character Melvin suffers from OCD, an anxiety disorder whose symptoms include recurring thoughts and repetitive behaviors. Through a series of events, including taking care of and eventually liking a neighbor's dog, and going on a road trip with the neighbor and a waitress love interest, Melvin begins to overcome his anxiety. One of a number of comedy films with mental illness as the subject matter, What About Bob, centers on Leo, Richard Dreyfuss, a psychiatrist with a giant ego, and Bob, Bill Murray, his patient with a host of anxiety disorders including agoraphobia, the fear of being outside. Bob ends up following Leo to his vacation home where Leo's family embraces him, much to Leo's annoyance. As the Bob becomes cured of his anxiety problems, Leo grows more and more mentally unhinged until he ends up temporarily institutionalized at the end of the movie. Several anxiety disorders are featured in Vertigo, a classic thriller by Alfred Hitchcock, the master of making moviegoers squirm in their seats. Acrophobia, or fear of heights, afflicts a former policeman, now a private detective hired to follow a friend's wife who is acting strangely. The woman in question attempts suicide once, and then seemingly a second time in which she succeeds. Only at the film's end is it revealed that the detective's friend is pulling a hoax and really threw his murdered wife's already dead body off the roof of a tower in an attempt to cover up the killing. Post-traumatic stress disorder, an anxiety disorder experienced after someone suffers through a scary event or events, is most likely at the root of ex-fighter pilot Ted Stryker's fear of flying in this comedy film. Ted gets on a plane to pursue his girlfriend, a member of the flight crew. When both of the plane's pilots and many of the passengers become ill with food poisoning, Ted must confront his fears and overcome his anxiety to safely land the plane. This Hitchcock thriller features Marnie, a woman with various phobias including fear of men, storms, and the color red. After committing several robberies, she is caught by a man who blackmails her into marrying him instead of being turned over to the police. Ultimately she tries suicide, only to be rescued, and confesses the history behind her anxiety. Ben Stiller stars in this movie about a 40-year-old who recently had a nervous breakdown. Despite his anxiety problems, Roger Greenberg returns to Los Angeles, where he had ruined a record deal for his rock band 15 years earlier. While house-sitting for his successful brother, he becomes involved with his brother's assistant, tries to reconcile with an old girlfriend and his bandmates, and must deal with the illness of his brother's dog. The Aviator tells the story of Howard Hughes from the 1920s to 1947, highlighting both his success as a film producer and as a leader in aviation and his descent into mental illness as obsessive-compulsive disorder took over. As part of his OCD, Hughes repeats certain phrases and is afraid of germs and dust. Ultimately he successfully defends himself against charges brought by a competitor, but even at the end of the film he's still haunted by his anxiety and mental demons.